Welcome to part 3 of 3 for our DEP bee and butterfly monitoring here at the Titusville Field Station Garden. We're going to go ahead and start on the third part of monitoring, our final part, which is bee monitoring. So it's the same exact transect that we use for butterfly monitoring, starting at the dish and then ending at the other dish at the end of the transect. And then we do our second transect across the street, but of course we start over here in the garden first. So to kick off, Irene makes sure that garden is circled on the data sheet, and once Kirk is ready to go, Irene writes down the time in hours and minutes, and then goes ahead and switches the stopwatch over to stopwatch time and keeps track of time for us as we walk our transect. So whenever Kirk is ready, he'll let Irene know, and she'll go ahead and start the stopwatch.
All right, let's start.
Okay. So to start, there's a lot of bee activity over here on our dotted horseman. So we want to make sure that we're observing things from the dish out and forward. So we're not looking behind the transect line at all, just from the dish forward. So for bee monitoring, we only count bees that are actively using flowers. So all of this flying that you're seeing on the video, we can't count. It has to be a bee using a flower. So if you go ahead and look right here, you can see, oh, where'd it go? Kirk has observed this bee here on the dotted horseman. That's why he brought us over here. And together we decide that this bee would be put in the medium big bee category. You can see him, or maybe you can't see him on the video, but he's using the dotted horseman. Okay. Oh, now Kirk has spotted another bee over on the dotted horseman. And this one as well would go in the medium big bee category. So it's not quite the size of a carpenter bee or a bumblebee, but it's still large enough to put us in that Apidae family. So Irene is writing down, we have 2 medium big bees, and they were both on the dotted horseman. So now we'll continue along. For our transect, we want to walk at a rate of about 10 feet per minute, and these stepping stones are about every 10 feet. So Irene helps keep track of time, while Kirk is looking at flowers along the transect, trying to see if there's any bees on them. So again, for bee monitoring, we only count bees that are using flowers. So we look at flowers along the transect to try to see if there are bees using them. So our width of monitoring for the bee transect is usually about 3 feet on each side, because that's typically where we can see bees. But if we see bees activity going on further away, we can step off the transect all the way out to the garden edge if we need to identify. Okay, so we're off the transect because Kirk has spotted a bee, and he has spotted the honeybee using the lantana flowers. So we have one honeybee actively using flowers, so we go ahead and count that bee. Looks like we have a second honeybee. So we have 2 honeybees on the lantana. We want to be careful not to count the same bee twice, so we do our best to try to avoid that happening with a good amount of teamwork. Okay, and then once we've investigated, we step back to the transect and continue on from where we left. So as you can see, again, Kirk is the only one that is allowed to observe bees, but the group can help him identify the bee species and the flower that the bee is using. Okay, so we've made it back over to our dish. So that's the end of the transect. Now that we're finished with the bee monitoring transect, Irene stops the stopwatch, writes the stopwatch time, and then switches it back to time mode and writes the actual time in hours and minutes. So once we finish off our bee transect over in the garden area, then we walk across the street and conduct the bee transect in the adjacent lawn. So we start on the north end of the lawn at the driveway, right at the beginning of the patch of grass, and then we walk at that same speed, 10 feet per minute, across the sunny area in the front part of this lawn, all the way across until we get to the second driveway. So again, same rules apply. You can only look for bees that are using flowers. So we're looking for flowers in the lawn grass and identifying any bees that are using it. And again, it should take us about 7.5 minutes to make it from one end of the lawn across to the other, looking for bees in the sunny part of the lawn, walking through the middle of that space. So that was part 3 of our monitoring protocol. Thank you all for watching and happy monitoring.